This very iconic image of the Ramakrishna temple in Belur Mutt brings a solemn sort of an impact on all of us. Every time I have been there at Belur, this image, even when I'm not there, is ingrained, is totally in the mind at every point. Today we are very happy. It's a very beautiful moment that we have with us Swami, Srimat Swami Narasimhananda Ji Maharaj, who is the Ramakrishna Mission Sevashram Secretary of Kozhikode in Kerala. But before getting to know him better, it's a very important topic that has been taken up. And in this 38th web meet or seminar since the lockdown, I really salute Public Relations Society of India, Kolkata chapter, under the able leadership of the chairman Shomojit Mahapatra and the vice chairman Subhash Mohanty, the general secretary Chitralekha ma'am, and everyone else to bring 38 web meets, web seminars, webinars, whatever you call, on 38 important themes. And today's theme is one prominent one. How do we inspire the youth of this country to bring a more tolerant, peaceful society around? There are certain challenges beyond an individual's control. For example, the economy has been hit hard since the COVID has struck. Even before the challenges were there, even before COVID. But COVID has made it even acute. But in spite of certain things beyond our control, there are several things within our control. And we will know it from Swamiji, how the youth can contribute. By the way, we are a nation of youth. 54% of the population is below 25 years. At this point, 283 million, that's almost 29 crores of students are there. And therefore, the youth has an important and a massive role here. Swamiji, who is a monk of the Ramakrishna Mission Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission, founded by Swami Vivekananda ji in 1897, is currently the secretary of Ramakrishna Mission Sevashram Kozhikode, Kerala, and runs a higher secondary school, a kindergarten, and a polyclinic. He is the former editor of Prabuddha Bharati. Many of us have read many issues of Prabuddha Bharata, an English monthly journal of humanities and social sciences, which was started by Swami Vivekananda himself in 1896. He has edited, Swamiji has edited a volume of Swami Vivekananda's teachings titled Vivekananda Reader. He regularly speaks in institutions of national importance like the IITs. We are even honored at Adamas University, of which I am the Pro-Vice Chancellor. Swamiji had found time to address our students physically and online twice in the last 1.5 years. That's indeed, we are very lucky. He also works in the field of management and spirituality and gives classes in many business schools, specializes in Indian studies, Indian philosophy, sociology of religion, philosophy of religion, religious studies, and translation studies. He speaks and writes in Hindi, English, Sanskrit, Malayalam, Bengali, and Tamil. As part of his responsibilities in the Ramakrishna Mission for the last 23 years, he has handled the departments of financial management, human resource management, publication sales, publication production, audio production, video production, so very important in today's time, information technology, personal training and development, relief and rehabilitation, value-based education, and hospital management, healthcare. He frequently conducts professional development programs for mid and senior level management executives with a focus on ethics at the workplace. Another very significant aspect in corporate life of India. Today we are looking at looking forward to listening from him how the youth of the nation, if I was telling that 54% is below 25 years, 67% is below 35 years, more than 70% is below 40 years. So that's a huge amount of youth in this country, which is a bane and a boon. Boon if they are guided well, and bane if it is if they're misguided. Yes, PRSI is a 63 years old national body. We are proud to be together here to listen to Swamiji. Over to you, Swamiji, for your speech.
Om. Thank you so much for that nice introduction, and I hope I live up to the introduction. Also, I thank PRSI for organizing so many web events, particularly in this circumstance of COVID-19. The topic is how can we help Indian youth to bring about a more tolerant society, or to bring about a society where there is less of intolerance. Now, before we enter into the subject proper, I just want to remind ourselves that most of the times the problem is that we are unable to understand the youth. Swami Vivekananda said that I have faith in the youth of India. From them will arise my workers. So Swamiji wanted more and more youth to understand his message. And at the same time, he had tremendous faith in them. The problem of generation gap, as we call it, is an imposed problem. Because only when you imagine such a problem, when you don't want to understand people who have born after you, that you talk about generation gap. So it is a superimposed problem, because we do see in the Upanishads and almost in all ancient texts that the teacher was very happy to share one's knowledge, lived wisdom with people irrespective of their age. So the problem of identifying youth has to be understood first. And for this, we can go to the Taittiriya Upanishad, where youth is defined as a person who has these three qualities: Ashishtaha, Dridishtaha, and Balishtaha. Ashishtaha means one who has speed, one who has sufficient pace to do things, to understand things. Dridishtaha, one who has the resolve to do things, who is resolute. And Balishtaha, one who is strong physically, intellectually, and also emotionally. So strength, resolve, and pace is what we need to be classified as youth. And as we understand, this probably has got very less to do with the age itself. So the youth has to have pace, energy, and strength, and the youth has to have strong resolve. Now, how can we help the youth in getting such a environment where they could be more useful, or they could help Indians to become more tolerant? When we see this problem at this way, like this, in this manner, this aspect of the problem also gives us a new avenue to think about the problem, and that is, what are we giving the youth? So suppose there was a person who is, say, 80 years old today, and if that person were to travel down the memory lane and think what was that person's youth 50 years ago, immediately one thing becomes clear, that our society is giving much negative vibes to the youth today. Negative in terms of the condition of society, negative in terms of the condition of economy, the condition of education, healthcare, so on and so forth. And media has a great role to play in this. So, first thing we need to do is to give the youth an environment which is self affirming and self assuring, and an environment which helps to understand one's cultural roots. In the late 50s and the early 60s, people started migrating all over the world to different places, to greener pastures, so to say, in order to find better career avenues. And in the process, something happened which led to, after a couple of decades, people being born in places which were different from their original cultural roots. But these people were not educated as far as their cultural values were concerned. And so, what happened? You have an Indian living in New York who does not have a clue about Indian values. And so, this led to an interesting situation. It led to people either over enthusiastically holding on to values or holding on to cultural models which had become dated and were not practiced in their original geographical locations, or it led to completely giving up of cultural values and cultural models. So this led to a kind of potpourri where there was a lot of mixture of cultural understandings, and also this led to a lot of confusion, much confusion. And the generation which is now called millennials are born with the wisdom of much cross-cultural understanding because of this very phenomenon which happened in the uh, early 70s or early 80s. So 70s and the 80s, 1970s and the 80s. I'm giving this as a prelude to our understanding of how we can motivate our youth, that is Indian youth, to have a better accepting society. I have reservations in using the word tolerant because I'm a follower of Swami Vivekananda, who famously said in the Parliament of Religions, World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, he said, we want acceptance, not tolerance. So accepting every belief system as something a person has the freedom to adopt would come naturally to the Indian youth if we start our interaction with the Indian youth from where they are comfortable. Oftentimes I am surprised how in the media and elsewhere we talk to the youth about things like equality, things like gender equality, economic parity, and so on and so forth. The problem is today the youth is much polarized. So the urban youth is already well educated about gender equality and economic parity, whereas the rural youth, though educated, does not see it in practice. So for the rural and the semi-urban youth, gender equality and economic parity is more in the text than in practice. So it becomes important to understand where the youth is coming from. To talk about economic parity as something which has to be done is simply wasting the time of the urban youth because they already know it. What they are confused about is that they are living in a highly charged cross cultural environment, and it's a challenge for them to understand and respect different cultural values. In many cases, they are on a everyday basis dealing with people from different nationalities, and that we can see in the main metropolitan cities of the country. So I said the youth is very polarized because if you go to rural India, what you see is that this youth lacks exposure to the rest of the country and is most of the time shocked by what is going on elsewhere. And this news is given to this youth from the media. So, first, we need to arrive at the common ideals of the nation. When I say common ideals of the nation, one should not mistake it to be some kind of propaganda. And here I think we can safely follow Swami Vivekananda, because Swami Vivekananda, though technically was a Hindu monk, was much beyond than merely being a Hindu sannyasi. So Swamiji again and again, when he returned from the West in 1897, he gave a series of lectures from Colombo to Almora, Almora in the present Uttarakhand and Colombo in Sri Lanka today. And these lectures are famously called as the lectures from Colombo to Almora. Every youth of the country should read these lectures, not because they contain some religious wisdom, but because this is the crux of Swamiji's message to the country, particularly to the youth. And in these lectures, he says what India is lacking. And though these lectures were given in 1897, in the earlier part of 1897, I'm very sad to say that even after more than a century passing away, exactly speaking, more than 123 years passing away, we are still following, or we are still in the same scenario as Swamiji saw India then. And so Swamiji very clearly says that every country has a backbone, has a life force, lifeblood, has a center. And for some countries it's politics, for some countries it is economy, for some countries it's something else. But for India, it is spirituality. Now again, this should not be understood as an attempt to turn every youth to religion. What Swamiji said was, everything in India has happened through spirituality, and it continues to be so. He went as far as saying that the Ganga starts in Gomukh and mixes with the ocean in Ganga Sagar. Even if it were possible to change the course of Ganga, river Ganga, even if it were possible to change the origin of Ganga or change the place where it mixes with the ocean or change the course in between, even if such an impossible task were possible, it is impossible to change the fact that the life center of this country is spirituality. Now, when I say spirituality, it means only one thing: to understand oneself in a doubtless manner, to understand what is the core of one's own self. It is the self-searching model that Swami Vivekananda wanted every youth to follow. First, have a sure grip on yourself and then search what you want in the world. Like Sri Ramakrishna Swami Vivekananda's Guru said, first have the knowledge of oneness, Advaita, and with that knowledge tied at your clothes hem, you can go on and do whatever you want to do in the world. So, Swami Vivekananda was telling that it was imperative to understand oneself. And why is it imperative? Swamiji says elsewhere that the difference between a person who is successful and a person who is not successful is the difference between faith, Shraddha, between these two people. He says this word Shraddha cannot be translated, but the near equivalent we can find of this word is sincerity of purpose and faith in oneself. So, unless we have faith in oneself, we cannot do anything. And on the contrary, if we have faith in ourselves, we can do anything and everything we want. So Swamiji also says that the difference between a successful person and an unsuccessful person is also the difference in concentration. A person with concentration, that means a person with a trained mind, will be able to achieve whatever she or he wants rather than a person with an untrained mind. Swamiji says that a person with an ideal, if that person fails 1,000 times, a person without an ideal will fail 10,000 times. And so, what we today need with the youth, I have had the privilege to meet Indian youth across a couple of decades over the length and breadth of this country. And I can say with certainty that the youth lacks vision today. Youth does not have an ideal, and youth does not have a trained mind. So these two things are lacking in the youth. And I would not say that these two things were available in plenty in the past, but the circumstances in society were more conducive in past for these things to be developed. And who has spoiled the situation? We have spoiled the situation. People who are parents or grandparents today have spoiled the situation. We have imposed our aspirations, those aspirations which we couldn't fulfill ourselves, on the youth today. We are loading them with to-do lists more and more by the day. And COVID has not helped in this direction. So though they are in their houses, they have no leisure, they have to toil hard to achieve what their parents or grandparents couldn't. So this is I think for any species, this is a peculiar phenomenon to be in. And on the other hand, we don't involve youth in policy decision making. Particularly, we don't involve children. It has been my experience that children below 10 years, above 5 years, have a fount of wisdom. And if we only involve their insights into our policy making decisions, then we will find that we are eventually creating a better society to live in. So on the one hand, we don't have faith in the youth. On the other hand, we are imposing aspirations on them. And on the thirdly, we don't seem to invest any time to understand their problems. For instance, in 2012, a very reputed survey company across the world did a survey and came with this result that Indian youth obey their parents more than the youth of any country. And that is a truth even now. So Indian youth is more rooted in values, more rooted in cultural mores, and yet we are unable to use this great human resource to our advantage. I think the reason is because we haven't been able to pass on the spiritual wisdom to Indian youth. And so, as Swamiji said, religion has been used by all people, including the marketplace, including the politicians, including the educationists, and almost every other discipline of the humanity to change the decisions or influence the decisions of people of this country. And so we have to take a cue from there, and we have to let youth have a freedom to understand spirituality in their own way, but we should have to make avenues open for them. For instance, if an Indian youth wants to understand spiritual traditions, there is no way that youth can do that in an unbiased manner today. Whereas in countries like the United States of America or United Kingdom, there are courses for understanding religious traditions or spiritual traditions. In our country, we lack that even now. Obviously, a person would like to have a scientific study of religion to understand that. So, because most of social avenues, social disciplines, and other disciplines of human endeavor are focused on using religion to their own purposes, we need our youth to understand, uh, have an unbiased understanding about religion. That is very, very important. And second thing is, what about the increasing psychological trauma that the youth is facing today? And I have first-hand experience of how youth has so much pressure, so much stress, that by the day, more and more youths are falling prey to psychological illnesses. So again, that is something which we can do. On one hand, we need to set up proper, sustainable machinery which would not see psychological illnesses as a taboo, which will not stereotype them, but will lend a hand to help them. On the other hand, we need to lend a ear to the youth and listen to what they have to say. More often than not, a person who is suffering from some psychological problem does not want you to fix their problems, but just want you to hear them. So the very idea that youth needs fixing is a very disturbing idea. And as I told in the beginning, generation gap is an imposed concept. There is nothing called generation gap. It is only if we want to believe, then it exists. Otherwise, there is nothing called generation gap. And we don't need to fix the youth. If it were so, India would have already be shattered or destroyed. Because as it was rightly pointed out, Indian population has the most youth in the world today. And most of the departments of Indian society are being handled by youth today. So if youth were the problem, then of course we would have already been facing a great situation at our hands. So youth is not to be blamed, but we have to learn so much from the youth. How can we ensure that there is a lot of interaction between youth from different parts of the country? Why can't urban youth go and visit rural India? I have many times come across youth who have never seen a village in India. And that again disturbs me. Why shouldn't they go and see suffering? So exposure to the ground realities of rural India, of India where there is lesser access to education or healthcare, will sensitize our youth, and they will be able to understand India better. And this is very important because today we can do that. We can use technology, like I am sitting in Kozhikode or Calicut, and we are having this talk, we are having this event using technology. And Corona has helped us in understanding the tremendous power that technology can wield. And so, on a lighter vein, I came across a video. Corona is confused now because India is a country where we have made more videos and TikTok videos and prank videos about Corona than I think any other nation has. So I came across this video where the child is saying that I will not attend the online class because Just a year ago, you were saying, don't touch the tab, don't touch the internet. And now you want me to do the class and homework using the tab and the internet. So I will not do it. So we were actually blaming the internet and the social media for all the ills of our society. And it is today that we realize that it is anything but so. So technology is a tool, and just like a knife can be used to cut the fruit or cut a throat, similarly, technology can be used in positive life building manner. We need to understand this, and we need to also put ourselves in the position of the youth, particularly the millennials, because I find the millennials to be extremely pressured, and they have to take care of their families, they have to be supportive to their parents. Most of the parents are quarreling, and they have to also have career options, they have to attend entrance, take up competitive exams, and more often than not, they are only fulfilling the aspirations of their parents. So there is a lot of thing, there is much to do. For instance, the area of career counseling, there is so much of disparity. Even in urban India, very few people actually have access to proper career counseling, career guidance. And so whenever you ask a person, what would you do after 10 plus 2, after the school, they are clueless. And here I am reminded of a conversation that Swami Vivekananda had with his disciple Sharat Chandra Chakravarti in 1898, way back in 1898 in Belur Math. Swamiji was saying to Sharachandra Chakravarti, who used to give classes or tuitions, as we call it today, to students. He said, why are you wasting your time in doing this? And why is it that all young people want only jobs and jobs? What has happened to our country? Why is it that every youth is going to different people and saying, give me employment, give me employment? Swami Vivekananda says in 1898, when we were not having the fad of entrepreneurship or marketing, Swamiji says that why don't you buy Banarasi silk saris and sell it in United States of America or in the Europe, and I will tell my friends in the Europe and in the United States of America to help you. Why don't you take the spices from our country and sell it elsewhere? So why don't you depend on yourself? Why don't you start a business? Though Swamiji did not use the modern terms for these, but he was indicating at a marketing endeavor, he was indicating at an entrepreneurship, at a startup endeavor. So we need to inspire the youth, we need to facilitate the youth. But it is sad, I am saddened to see that even today in 2021, I see across the country so-called old people. Why I'm saying so-called adults, because their behavior doesn't show that they are adults. So so-called old people or adults discouraging Indian youth from taking up new ventures, seeking new pastures. So what we need today is creating avenues for the Indian youth to train their minds, something which we need to do. Because in one of the Upanishads it is said, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. The mind alone is the cause for the liberation and the bondage of human being. And so let us enable young people to train their minds. Let us not create more distractions in their lives. Let us not create more obstacles in their lives in terms of training their mind. Let us be facilitators in training their mind. Let them train their minds first. Second thing is, let them understand the cultural roots. Let us provide all the raw materials so that they understand what India is. As many people have said before me, I also say India is not just the border. India is not just a geographical boundary. India is not just some particular text. India is an idea. And what is that idea? This idea we find in the Rig Veda, as we find it in many other texts also. But because I have read the Rig Veda very much, and so I'm quoting from the Rig Veda, there is a mantra called, the mantra goes like this: Ano Badraha Kratavo Yantu Vishwataha. Let noble thoughts come from all sides. So, the idea of India is an idea which is inclusive. We never actually in Sanskrit, as in many other Indian languages, there is no word for stranger. We don't have a word equivalent to stranger. We only use the opposite of known person. So aparichit. So aparichitah. So parichitah, aparichitah. We don't have any word for stranger as such. The opposite of known is what we use for stranger. Unknown, that is what. We don't say it is a stranger. There is a possibility. We hope that we understand that person. And that is the idea of India. And that is why it is inclusive. And we open with both our hands, and we don't just tolerate, but we accept. See all the religious traditions. I think India is a tapestry of all religious practices. And if you come to the state of Kerala in India, you will see that much more than anywhere else. All religious traditions of the world have been preserved in this state and in India. So if you talk about Judaism, it is living here today. If you talk about Syrian Christianity, it is living here today. Many other micro religious practices and traditions, minorities, are living here today. Why? Because we accept all traditions with open arms. Even political ideologies which have almost died across the world live in India today. So whatever idea human being has produced, you can see it living in India today. And that is the idea of India or Bharat. So we need to understand that, and we need to tell that to our youth. We need them to understand it for themselves. And so we need to create a platform for them where they can learn this by themselves, where they of themselves will understand this world as a better place. Because what I see in the millennials, I am very jealous of them, that they have been born in a society which is much more evolved, which is a society with diffuse boundaries, where the boundaries are blurring, and we people who are in their 30s or 40s are adamant at polarizing the world. And this is a very saddening state of affairs. Youth of India should be given more and more role in policy making, decision making, etc. And only then we will be able to understand what is their potential. There is so much of energy in them, and we are unable to channelize them, unable to use the energy. Sports is one area where youth of India has to be patronized. I mean, they have to be sponsored. They have to be given the funds to develop their sports. If we just look at our neighbor China, see how strategically they have invested in sports and how they are reaping the rewards for decades now. But India has failed in that respect. And we, as Swamiji says, when he went to the United States of America, one day he was a guest of the Loins, and one day he was saying, I have found my love. And then the lady of that house, she asked, who is that lady, Swami? And Swamiji said, it is not a lady, it is American organization. And Swamiji says that America is great at organizing things. It is great at identifying great things across the world, bringing them to the country and utilizing them for the development of a country. He says, on the other hand, put four Indians together and then they will quarrel and then there will be a huge fight and then they will end up doing nothing. So this we have to understand. We have to learn from the message of Swamiji, and we have to learn from America, the organization. And once, apart from the imperial undertones of that country, we have to understand how good they are at organizing skills and how good their leadership is. So we have to develop our youth. We have to give them more and more responsibilities, not call them children, not call them inexperienced. So we have to give them a lot of responsibilities and see what they can do. Swamiji says only a human being can tell lie, but it's only a human being who can become a great saint. A wall cannot tell lie or steal, but a wall cannot become a saint. So this potential, which is unchannelized, which is misguided potential in Indian youth, has to be directed, and they have to be given greater and greater responsibilities so that India can see an emerging civilization. Swamiji said, yes, it is true that a nation becomes great by seeing its past, but a nation should also look forward to a glorious future. He says, yes, we should know our history, but at the same time, we should also look forward to a greater future. And this future can come if we give space to our youth to develop their minds, which is the only tool necessary to do things for any species for that matter, so much so, more so for human beings. And so we need to help them in developing their mind. We need to help them in developing their concentration. We need to help them in developing their understanding about India, that India is an idea of cultural understanding and cultural acceptance, not just tolerance, but acceptance, kindness. And also, we need to expose them more and more to societies which are underprivileged. And towards the end of this discussion, I want to point out that though today we are harping on how Indian youth should attain this position or that power, how Indian youth should clear, crack this examination or the other examination, we are rarely setting up a model of service to the Indian youth. When Swami Vivekananda did plague service in the late 1890s, he wrote a manifesto. And I request all of you to read that manifesto, as I also request you to read the lectures from Colombo to Almora. And in that manifesto, Swamiji starts, he says, if you are suffering, I also suffer. If you are happy, I am also happy. So he tells what is reflected by the Sanskrita word, Sahanubhuti. Sahanubhuti. I experience whatever you experience because we are all essentially one. And so where are the undertakings or avenues where an Indian youth can help society, when they can become one with the suffering, one with the underprivileged? Where is such an avenue? So that we have to create such avenues. To summarize, we have to first create tools to train the mind of the youth. Let the youth train their minds, and we have to create an avenue for that. Let them have greater and greater concentration. We have to create better, peaceful avenues for that. And let them have a greater understanding, spiritual and cultural understanding of India. We have to ensure that we have unbiased courses, unbiased avenues where they can get this understanding. And fourth, which is not the least, and that is, let us expose our youth to the underprivileged communities. Let us give them a chance to share their endeavor, share their experience, intelligence, and money even with the underprivileged. I am sure if we use this four-pronged approach, then we will be able to see a brighter India, as was the dream of Swami Vivekananda. And we will be seeing Swami Vivekananda's workers rise from the youth of India. I thank PRSA again for giving me this opportunity to share my ideas with you. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Swamiji. Before I briefly summarize once again what you said, I begin by thanking Madam Antara Chakravarti, PRSI member, for doing on our behalf, approaching you and requesting you to come and speak today. You have really touched certain very critical points, and personally also I have been enriched on certain points, like, for example, acceptance versus tolerance. This difference is very subtle and important difference. The tolerance is not a great virtue, acceptance is a great virtue. Naturally to Indian youth, it comes, acceptance comes, because India is a land of multiple belief systems, as you have put it very correctly. You have also noted how gender equality or economic parity, certain things which come naturally or understood naturally by the urban educated youth, may not be so naturally understood by the rural youth. So those things do not necessarily bind all the youth together. The core and the central value of a nation is spirituality in case of India. In many other cases, there have been other things, but for India, it's spirituality. And you also make a difference between this spirituality, which is a much bigger concept, and just religion. Youth needs an ideal, a role model, which can lead to a vision. But this role model and vision to be put into activity, put into practice, needs a trained mind. That's the other aspect that you bring forth. Elders usually, many a time, have less faith in youth or imposes their own aspirations on them. I have seen so many parents putting their unfulfilled dreams on their children. That's another common thing that we see. And not investing in knowing their problems. Investing to know their problems is very significant, as you have rightly said, with respect to youth. Indian youths more respectful to parents and elders. You have quoted an international survey to tell how Indian youths are more respectful to elders, have more values than many other youths of many other nations, even the developed nations. Sustainable mechanism is required, as you said, to handle the psychological illnesses as and when they have or when they appear in some cases, but not considering this illness as a taboo. This is another major thing. Depression is a known factor. Many celebrities in India have talked about depression. Some people have committed suicide in recent past on depression. So this is significant that without considering it as a taboo, sustainable mechanism to deal with it is required. Generation gap is an imposed concept. That's another important point. Imposed, imagined concept. It does not exist if you don't feel it. It exists only when you talk about it. So no need to fix the youth rather than to understand the youth. What is required is what your core message is. Idea of India or Bharat is all ideas, all faiths, all beliefs have a place to coexist and flourish. This is so much required in India at this point of time, when many communities, many groups are going into extreme positions. Evolved society with a diffusing boundary that you find the nation as a evolved society today. And youths, therefore, must have a greater role in this evolved society in policy making. You have also rightly pointed out sports development, physical development, and you have you have mentioned rightly that China, which has come to be one of the top two sporting nations of the world from nowhere. In 1949, China was nowhere. Today, it is among the top two, sometimes top three, sometimes. The US, Russia, and China, US, Russia, and US, China, and Russia is the usual order we have in Olympics or other games as well. You should know our history, but look forward to the future. Cannot live in history, and can be ascertained and can be developed if the youths are involved. This future, the future that comes in the making of the future, the youths must be involved. Expose youth to the marginalized society. That's another very important point. Many of our institutes have started this concept of going to hinterland of India and doing a project there. That's a great thing. Expose the youth to the marginalized societies, because real saha anubhuti, you know, I, uh, I experience what you experience. Saha anubhuti will come only when someone is exposed to that society or the challenges of that society. So, tools to train their minds, greater concentration, greater spiritual and cultural understanding of India, and exposing to the underprivileged people. These together might create a situation or an environment where the youth can contribute to a higher acceptance in the society. If I've missed out anything important, excuse me for that, but that's what my understanding from your last 45 minutes talk. I would welcome anyone in the audience would, if you'd like to put forth any question to Swamiji, any observation if you had, you can even put it in the chat. There may not be an option to speak, but you can put it in the chat. Swamiji, till one question comes out, the first question comes out. Can I ask you something myself? So,
Yeah.
at this point, we know there is a on one side there is career mindedness, on the other side there is violence, and these two are affecting the youth in a big way. Career mindedness can take the youth away from violence but makes them completely apathetic to society. Extreme career mindedness, I'm not telling someone who grows the career in a natural way, not that. Extreme career. And the other part is out of depression or whatever reason, a good section of people are moving to violence and taking up sometimes arms also. How do we tackle this dual trouble, that we face? Even as an educationist, I face this.
Before going to this, I would like to draw your attention to one problem. Because as you read in my introduction, I deal with many business communities. I also give
Right.
classes to them. So there is this misconception that India has, that Indian society is averse to wealth creation. And so we see that as a binary. We see making wealth as a binary as opposed to service. That need not be so. Because if you even go back to Vedic civilization, you see that people used to, the whole concept of Guru Dakshina for education and training was, in a way, in a small way, wealth creation to ensure sustainability. So the rishi who took Guru Dakshina was taking that to ensure that she or he, because there were many women rishis also, so she or he could pass on that knowledge to successive generations. So I think the root problem is this misunderstanding. So people who go for career, they think that if they don't invest time in career and money making, and if they even do some service, then they will be losing everything in their life, which is not true. And so what you see after 20 years or 15 years, which has become very common in India today, people who are in their mid 30s or mid 40s take a U-turn and go for a complete shift in career, go for some social entrepreneurship, etc. So from the beginning, we need to open up avenues for the youth and tell them that wealth creation is not something wrong. It is possible for you to go into deeper pockets of the country and do something meaningful, at the same time have a reasonable remuneration for yourself. When you actually put it in so many words, when, and as I told you, career guidance, we have to do much in the avenue of career guidance. And I am, as I am increasingly becoming aware, big changes come with small steps. So we don't need to actually create something great to bring change in society. So career guidance is one big small change we can bring. And there, if we say that social entrepreneurship or social avenues, social sector is a huge sector where one can go as a career option, then we, which is happening already many, because of, thanks to the corporate social responsibility requirement, many people are now hiring well qualified candidates, and they are working in the interiors of India, and they are getting a totally different picture than they were accustomed to. So even if they go back to their urban lives, fast paced lives, they have this experience at the back of their minds, and that helps them. So This we need to tell. And then let us train people in politics. Again, this is another problem, that India was never traditionally shy of wealth creation or politics. We have, in fact, been Arthashastra was written here. Okay, so we were not averse to these things. So let people be told, let there be informed politics, let people be trained in politics, and let politics be not some place where only illiterate people and ruffians go. So, and similarly with business, let business be something we build on the basis of ethics, on the basis of mutual understanding and trust. Once we try to rectify these two avenues of social life, then automatically I think more and more youth will be interested in statesmanship, and they will be interested in business. And so we will not have a binary situation where either you go for career or you go for social service, most often than not social service ending in dirty politics. I hope I responded to
Great.
your.
Yes, yes. Informed politics, politics of values, and nothing to be shy from wealth creation, which does not exploit people. So, really, there need not be a binary between extreme career and extreme, a sort of a violent sort of a situation. Need not be a binary. Actually, wealth creation, informed politics, and social good can coexist. That's what your central message is. Thank you. Anyone would like to bring a question, any question, or we will then. Otherwise, this was something I wanted to ask, and no, I have got the answer to that. Anyone would like to bring forth anything? It seems, at least, at least to my knowledge, there is no question at the moment. Never mind. Would you like to bring this to an end with any observation, any concluding comment, Swamiji?
I thank PRSI for organizing this event. But I also have a request to make, that why don't we start a venture? I can help you, and I am others also will help. Why don't we start a venture where we can take, say, some of these points which we discussed. Say we can develop an avenue for mind control or training of the mind, and so that we have something concrete which is built upon whatever we discussed today. Because as a one-off talk, it might be good, people might be impressed. But if we want to have a sustainable, long-standing solution, then I would be very happy if something comes out of this, where we can actually start some thing, where we have a place for developing of concentration, or developing of training of the mind, or even developing avenues of wealth creation, etc. Thank you.
Okay. I would request the PRSI Executive Council to think over this suggestion as has been put by Swamiji. I am of the opinion, I think there is a center that is coming out in the new town, I think Vivek Tirtha. Vivek Tirtha is coming out, which will be also a center of concentration and value-based learning, I'm told by Swami Suviranandaji Maharaj. And that is something, some place which is close to all of us, most of us rather, most of us who are in the audience. However, let's ponder over this suggestion from Swamiji. Swamiji, thank you very much. Your pranam to you and blessings for future. Thank you. With this, we bring this session to an end.